Have you ever witnessed a moment when a song stops being just a song and turns into something deeper? Something that hits you right in the chest. Something you don't just hear. Backhand index pointing right but feel. Tonight, we're talking about a performance that didn't just impress the judges. Backhand index pointing right, it left an entire room completely emotional. When Braden Rumfelt walked onto that stage, no one expected anything unusual. But within minutes, backhand index pointing right, everything changed. Backhand index pointing right, what did he do that made the entire room fall silent? Backhand index pointing right, why were people holding back tears? Backhand index pointing right, and what made this performance unforgettable? This isn't just a performance story. Backhand index pointing right, this is a moment you experience. Every powerful performance begins with a story. And Braden's story isn't easy. Before music, before the spotlight, Braden had a completely different dream. He was an athlete, a baseball player. That was his life. Early mornings, endless practice, a clear goal in mind. Backhand index pointing right, go pro. But life doesn't always follow the plan we imagine. One moment, everything changed. A serious injury. And just like that, backhand index pointing right, the dream he built his life around was gone. Think about that for a second. Everything you worked for, taken away in an instant. Most people would break. Most people would walk away. But Braden didn't. Backhand index pointing right, he chose a different path. Music, what was once just a passion, became his purpose. And slowly, his pain found a voice. Backhand index pointing right, but the real question is, did that pain become his greatest strength? Top 14. This is where things get real. No more second chances. No more safety nets. Backhand index pointing right, you're the standout. Or you disappear. Millions watching. Judges analyzing every second. And the pressure? Backhand index pointing right, it's overwhelming. Backstage, Braden stood quietly, focused, a little nervous, but carrying something deeper. Backhand index pointing right, a story he was ready to tell. Then came his song choice. Hard Fought Hallelujah. This isn't just a song. Backhand index pointing right, it's a journey. It's about struggle, faith, survival. And now the question was, backhand index pointing right, could he turn this into something unforgettable? His name was called. The lights dimmed. And step by step, backhand index pointing right, he walked into the moment that would change everything. The first note. Gentle. Controlled. Honest. And suddenly, backhand index pointing right, the entire room went quiet. No movement. No whispers. Just listening. There was something different about his voice. It wasn't just technically good. Backhand index pointing right, it was real. Every word carried weight. Every line felt personal. Backhand index pointing right, it didn't sound like he was performing. It felt like he was reliving something. As the song progressed, his confidence grew. His voice opened up. And the audience? Backhand index pointing right, they were no longer watching. Backhand index pointing right, they were feeling. Some people wiped their eyes. Others just stared, completely locked in. Because this wasn't entertainment anymore. Backhand index pointing right, this was connection. Now the song reached that critical point. The moment where everything could either fall apart. Backhand index pointing right, or become unforgettable. Braden paused. Closed his eyes. Took a breath. And then, backhand index pointing right, he delivered the line that changed everything. There was pain in his voice. But also something else. Backhand index pointing right, hope. It felt like he was saying, I've been through it, but I'm still standing. And in that moment, backhand index pointing right, the entire room understood him. The judges weren't judging anymore. Backhand index pointing right, they were listening. And then, backhand index pointing right, it happened. The high note. Raw. Powerful. Unfiltered. It filled the room. It hit hard. And for a second, backhand index pointing right, time stood still. The judges looked at each other. The audience rose to their feet. Backhand index pointing right, this wasn't just singing. Backhand index pointing right, this was something deeper. Something real. The song ended. And then, nothing. No applause. No cheering. Just silence. Backhand index pointing right, why? Because people were still processing what they felt. And then suddenly, applause exploded. A standing ovation. Some people were crying. Others smiling through emotion. Backhand index pointing right, but everyone felt something. And that's rare. One judge said, "This wasn't just a performance, it was truth." Another added, "You didn't just sing, you made us feel your story." And then, you could see it. Tears. Backhand index pointing right, and that says everything. Because when judges feel it, backhand index pointing right, you know something real just happened. So what made this performance different? Backhand index pointing right, why did it hit so hard? First, authenticity. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt fake. Backhand index pointing right, it was honest. Second, emotion. You could hear his past, his struggle, in every note. Third, connection. He didn't just perform to the audience. Backhand index pointing right, he connected with them. Everyone has a moment in life when things fall apart, when it feels like there's no way forward. Backhand index pointing right, but sometimes that moment becomes your turning point. Braden lost one dream, but found another. And maybe that's the message here. Backhand index pointing right, your setback might be your setup. Sometimes, winning isn't about a trophy. It's about proving to yourself. Backhand index pointing right, you didn't give up. Braden didn't just sing that night. Backhand index pointing right, he shared something real. Something honest. Something unforgettable. Now the question is, backhand index pointing right, is this just the beginning for him? Or, backhand index pointing right, are we witnessing the rise of something bigger? Because some voices, backhand index pointing right, aren't just heard. Backhand index pointing right, they stay with you.